I was going to follow up on that though. So what do you think is an out, really? Because as you said, well, we're stuck in this cycle, right? One side sort of escalates and the other side retaliates. And the other side retaliates to preempt the other side's response, but only to be frustrated because the other side also seeks to up military spending and presence, etc. So we're stuck in this cycle, as you've prophesized. Do you think there's a way out, or do you think there is no way out in that sense?
There's no way out. This is the tragedy of great power politics. This is why I argued that if China continued to grow economically, you would find yourself in this situation. We would find ourselves in this situation. That's what happened. Listen, I used to go to China and I used to ask this question. I'd say to my interlocutors, China decided in the early 1980s to integrate itself into the world economy that the United States had built after World War II. And as a result of China's integration into this economy, this worldwide economy, capitalist economy, China has flourished. It has done remarkably well. And at the same time, the United States has not been a military threat to China. There's no question of the United States invading China or using military power to coerce China to do something that it doesn't want to do. So given that very positive picture, why doesn't China just accept the fact that the United States runs the world? And why doesn't China just sit back and let the United States continue to run the international economy and to provide security for everyone in East Asia? I have never met a single Chinese who finds that alternative acceptable. They do not want to let the United States run the international economy and basically have a military that is dominant in East Asia and moreover all over the planet. The Chinese want to be a regional hegemon. The Chinese want to have a navy that can protect their sea lanes of communication. The Chinese want to project power into the Persian Gulf and other regions of the world. The Chinese, in other words, want to imitate the United States, all of which is a way of saying the Chinese, like the Americans, behave according to my theory.
But so I think that's a fair comment. I'll just make this slight observation, though, that you spent the first 60% of your comments there talking about China's incentives vis-a-vis the rest of East Asia as a regional hegemon. But I think there's a difference between regional hegemony and treating regional hegemony as sort of an intermediate step towards global hegemony versus seeing regional hegemony as the end state. And I guess there's a bit of indeterminacy right now in the thesis, because you could interpret what China is doing right now as it's striving towards maximizing its power within Asia and then not beyond that. But you could also interpret its actions, if you're more cynical or pessimistic about Belt and Road, as it's striving towards a form of global dominion. But my question about the global dominion hypothesis or reading is, given that China's reformed and opened up in the 1980s and since then has accumulated, broadly speaking, enough capital and enough momentum in its trajectory to be quite a sizable economy, why not sooner, but later, in terms of why now, as opposed to 10 years ago, in terms of, say, letting its global ambitions, if that's indeed the case, or if that's indeed the correct reading, letting its global ambitions be known? Is it to do indeed just with its nature as a powerful or economic powerhouse, or is it instead to do with domestic politics, perhaps, in China, or indeed subtler variations within the state that do not necessarily correlate with just a materialist or militaristic interpretation of its capacity? Also, sorry for asking multiple questions, but I guess that's my retort there.
Well, look, to talk about China establishing global hegemony at this point in time makes no sense at all. China is not even a regional hegemon. It has the United States in its face. It first has to establish regional hegemony, and it's not clear that it can do that. The United States is going to go to enormous lengths to prevent that. But China's not in the position now And in my opinion, it'll never be in a position to achieve global hegemony because, in my opinion, the best you can do is achieve regional hegemony and make sure there is no other regional hegemon. What China should want to do is become a regional hegemony and then cause trouble for the United States in the Western Hemisphere. Because if the United States faced trouble in the Western Hemisphere, it would limit its ability to roam into East Asia. Most people never ask themselves this question. Why is the United States roaming all over the planet, sticking its nose in every country's business? The answer is the United States is free to roam. It's so secure in the Western Hemisphere, it doesn't have to worry about security threats in its backyard. So therefore, it's free to take its military forces and put them in Europe, the Persian Gulf, East Asia, and so forth and so on. If the United States had to deal with Canada or Mexico or Brazil as potential security threats, the United States would be much more constrained in its ability to project power around the world. And that would be in China's interest. So from my point of view, the smart strategy for China over the long term is to become a regional hegemon in Asia and go to great lengths to then limit America's hegemonic position in the Western Hemisphere. Look, there is no question that great powers do not like the idea of other great powers on their borders. There's just no question about that. This is why the United States has the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah.
This is why NATO expansion up to Russia's borders was a prescription for disaster.
Yeah.
And it's why we had a war over Georgia in 2014, and in 2008, and why we had the Ukraine crisis in 2014. Now, with regard to China, China does not like the fact that the United States is sitting on its borders. In East Asia, the United States is already there. You want to remember that in 1950, the United States and China went to war in Korea, and that war lasted until 1953. It was not a war between the United States and North Korea. It was a war between the United States and China. The United States has large numbers of military forces right on China's border. Now, what are the consequences of that? Well, China wants to get the Americans out of East Asia. It wants to push them first beyond the first island chain and then beyond the second island chain. And as I have said on numerous occasions, if I was the national security advisor in Beijing, I would tell the leadership it's imperative to get the Americans out of East Asia. It's a form of the Monroe Doctrine. However, the Americans don't want to leave East Asia. The Americans want to stay there, and the Americans want to be the principal military force in the region, if that is at all possible. The Chinese, again, are not going to be happy about that. And the end result is that you're going to have this security competition. And it's going to be fueled by the fact that the Americans are going to do more and more to contain China, which is going to make the Chinese angrier and angrier, which will cause the Americans to do more and more. And you see this basic logic playing out over Taiwan.
Exactly. And also by extension, I guess, Hong Kong, really.